Our topic is our collective responsibility for sustainable leadership in all spheres of engagement in Africa. Our collective responsibility for sustainable leadership in all spheres of engagement in Africa. Um, okay, very good. So just for introduction, I know with all of us committed to issues of leadership capacity, especially capacity building, not only for our generation, but as we look ahead to the future of our nations and the future of the continent as a whole. It goes without doubt that our greatest need on the continent is collective responsibility. I'm emphasizing some aspect of the topic, collective. Collective because sometimes we think of leaders only as people occupying positions. We think of politicians, we think of heads of NGOs and so on. But I'm emphasizing the collective to indicate that we must go beyond those who occupy positions and see leadership as a corporate responsibility. And the leadership must be sustainable. It's not just a flash that disappears. And I'm emphasizing also all spheres of engagement, all spheres, because I believe we read the Bible, and when we read the Bible, we see God addressing all spheres of life. Sometimes I go back to the Old Testament just to read through the laws, as in Leviticus, as in Deuteronomy, and I discover God speaks concerning all spheres of life, not only issues of synagogue or temple worship, but God speaks about agriculture. God speaks about architecture. God speaks about market skills we use in the market. God speaks about animals, as in when you see your enemy's donkey falling down or in a pit, stop whatever you are doing and rescue that animal. And of course, God spoke even about toilet habits. So when we think leadership, it involves all spheres of engagement. For what purpose? For the common good of all. This is to emphasize, dear friends, that leadership capacity building is not an end in itself. When I speak to some people on our continent, their ambition is to get to a certain leadership position, be it to be president or the leader of the party or the CEO of the business. And sometimes the way it's spoken of gives the impression that to get into that position is an end in itself. No, it's not an end in itself. It is for all Africans to enjoy the shalom of God manifest and lived out in peaceful coexistence, unity, and human flourishing. This is the will of God for humanity summed up into words: shalom, or the peace of God, and common good. Shalom, or the peace of God, and common good. And for me, this is very important, because when we go back to the scriptures, the very beginning, when God said to our ancestors, be fruitful and multiply, it's not just about procreation or populating the earth. Beyond that, it is to flourish and enjoy shalom as God intends it to be. as relates to matters at hand, God's shalom, God's peace for humanity includes peace, security, unity, and development, be it human development, national or continental. You may be wondering what these have to do with the issue of sustainable leadership. I will be biased because of where God has placed us as Africans. I tend to focus my reflection on what goes on in our context. And what a defining text of scripture for me is Acts 17:26, which assures me that I am an African by God's appointment. It is no mistake. In the past, we were called the dark continent, we are called the hopeless continent, but we are not defined and must not be defined by what other people call us, but by what God calls us. So God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. In other words, God has predetermined not only how long we should live, our allotted periods, how long we should live, but also the boundaries of our habitation, of our dwelling place. So, God has a purpose for placing us on this continent called Africa. And most of the reflection this morning will focus on that. Here in Ghana, where I live, someone whom we call Agri of Africa has emphasized that only the best is good enough for Africa. And he said, my people of Africa, we were created in the image of God, but men have made us think we are chickens, and we still think we are, but we are eagles. Stretch forth your wings and fly. Don't be content with food of chickens. Friends, when we think leadership capacity, we must bear in mind that not only for Agri, Dr. Agri of Ghana or Africa, but also for God, only the best is good enough for Africa according to God's purpose for us. But it takes our collective responsibility for sustainable leadership in all spheres of engagement to experience the shalom or well-being of God for our nations and continent. But our long-distance race to attain it is reflected in Stephen Ade's conclusion that leadership is a cause. All other things are effects. So according to Stephen Ade, leadership, which we are reflecting on today, is the cause. All other things are effects. Because according to him, our leaders have failed in most of the areas in which leadership makes a difference. The provision of vision, development of workable strategies, mobilizing our people as one nation, mobilizing national resources for development, managing change internally, and responding effectively to outside threats and opportunities, making credible decisions, and solving the big problems we face. Those are in Professor Stephen Ade's words. But friends, let me share with us the signs and consequences that actually show the reality of what Stephen Ade is referring to. Signs and consequences of lack of leadership. Only 2 days ago, it was in the news that 280 Nigerian schools in the north western town of Kuriga in Nigeria were abducted by bandits. If you've been following the Nigerian story, we have kidnappers, we have bandits, we have almost absolute insecurity. I was home in Nigeria some months ago, and people are so afraid. They don't know who is going to be attacked next, who is going to be kidnapped next. Bishops have been kidnapped. Principals of schools have been kidnapped. Can you imagine sending your children to school and hearing that in their school, 200 pupils have been abducted by bandits? I suggest to us, this is a consequence of lack of leadership as it should be. And then you must have heard in the news in South Africa about Jocelyn, somebody's daughter who has been missing. And then only 2 days ago or yesterday, I've been trying to follow the news. I read that Jocelyn had been sold to a traditional healer for 20,000 rands or $1,000 as the case may be. And as the news has it, it's reported that a child goes missing every 5 hours in South Africa. I'm not just singling out South Africa, friends. This is common practice in many nations. And I put it to absence of collective leadership. Because the kidnapping of children, the abduction of children is not just the failure of leadership at the top, but leadership at the grassroots. So when school children fall into and die in pit latrines, friends, can you believe it? Pit latrines are still so common with us. And sometimes money allocated to dig pit latrines or to provide adequate toilets and facilities of convenience, money allocated is embezzled. The embezzlement is not just with the president or ministers. It goes down to the grassroots. So when the money is embezzled and poorly constructed pit latrines are used by children who fall into it and die, is evidence of failure of leadership. Or when motor accidents happen because contractors have eaten the money that should have been used for more stable and long-lasting roads. We can go further. When more than 30 people were killed, as it was recently when a boat crossing Lake Kivu capsized in the DRC, because it's been overloaded not only by people, but overloaded with bags of cement. Friends, even if we have things to celebrate, there is so much lamentation in our context. 3 days ago on the 6th, it was Independence Day here in Ghana. And on the ICI, the platform of our Institute for Christian Impact, I posted congratulations to Ghana for independence. And many Ghanaians came back to me and said, what are we celebrating? It's not independence, but lamentations for dependency on the West on many fronts. So this is the reality why we must bear in mind that responsible leadership for all spheres of engagement is our collective responsibility. Leadership must not be limited to politicians, NGOs, or foundations. Because often this is the challenge we have, that when we think sustainable leadership, we limit it to leadership within church, becoming bishops, apostles, and other ministry titles in church. And then we abdicate leadership in the public sphere of engagement, the marketplace, the institutions, to politicians, to government, to NGOs. Friends, this should not be. Politicians love to talk of protection or defense of territorial integrity. But I suggest to us, there is never the loss of territorial integrity without the collapse of moral integrity and responsibility. Before Israel was sent into exile, before they lost their territorial integrity with the invasion of enemy kings and rulers, in dismantling Jerusalem, the holy city, before the failure of the territorial integrity, moral integrity has collapsed with the disobedience to Yahweh's laws. So when I think of the calamities in Nigeria, for me, it's not just about insecurity in states, in schools, is that the foundation that should ensure that has collapsed. The foundation of moral integrity. So bandits, thieves, rogues, Boko Haram and others who carry out these activities are products of the collapse of moral integrity. And this is important as we reflect on leadership. Therefore, our urgent need, let me suggest to us, is to redefine leadership beyond the idea of posts, positions, or directing groups of people to do things or to move in particular directions. Yes, those positions of responsibilities are important. But beyond the idea of posts and positions or defense of all qualities listed on Google and other search engines about leadership, we must go beyond the trappings of power and benefits ascribed to temporary holders of positions of responsibility. I emphasize, those in those posts and positions are temporary holders. Even if they try to become permanent holders, lifetime holders, they are still temporary. So we must go beyond such definitions of leadership to something I would define so simply, which sometimes we don't apply to leadership. So I want to suggest to us today that leadership is knowing the right thing to do and doing it whenever and wherever one is. Leadership is knowing the right thing to do and doing it whenever. In other words, at all times and wherever. Wherever means whether I occupy a position or not, a post of responsibility or not. It is knowing the right thing to do, friends, even in the small things, as in where I throw my trash, as in when I eat a piece of banana while driving, observing that most people, when they eat banana or oranges while driving, throw the rubbish out on the street. Friends, leadership includes that. The lack of leadership includes that. And the foundation for it, friends, is what scripture rightly puts in James 4:17. Therefore, to him or her who knows to do good and does not do it, to him or her, it is a sin. This is leadership. It's not only when we're in the White House or in the state mansion or palace. Because you see, our challenge in Africa is that we've relegated leadership to those in such palatial mansions who drive the best of limousines, who go around blaring sirens at the rest of us. But often they fail. because they don't even understand what it takes to fulfill the mandate for being in those positions. For instance, when God chose Israel to be light to other nations, it was for a leadership role. Israel was to be a leader, portraying God's light for the rest of the world. So when God chose Israel, the test of that mandate, friends, I'm emphasizing this because in Africa, we talk of the church growing. Everywhere we have churches. Churches are full on Sundays. We have lovely men of God, prophets and apostles, who do their best to faithfully proclaim the truths of God. But you see, the test of the mandate to Israel was not in how many people attend the temple or synagogue, but the difference it makes to follow Yahweh in the public sphere where the rubber meets the road. So God said to his prophet, Jeremiah, God said to him, go up and down the streets. Friends, go up and down the streets of Jerusalem. Go up and down the streets of Kampala, the street of Toronto. Go up and down the streets of Lilongwe, the streets of Maseru. Go up and down the streets of Nairobi, of Lagos, of Pretoria, of Johannesburg, and all other nations and cities represent you. Look around and consider. Search through her squares. If you can find but one person who deals honestly and seeks truth, I will forgive the city. Friends, when I define leadership as knowing the right thing to do and doing it, leadership begins in dealing honestly and seeking the truth, not just in church, but on the streets of the cities I have mentioned and many more. So Jeremiah was obedient. Jerusalem was the holy city. Religious rites and rituals were going on, they continued. But God saw beyond these exercises and happenings of religious passion and commitment. What did Jeremiah find out when he went into the cities? When he went into the streets of Jerusalem? He concluded, this is the finding. From the least to the greatest of them, everyone is greedy for unjust gain. From prophet to priest, everyone deals falsely. They have treated the wound of my people carelessly, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. All this have to do with character, conduct, and absence of integrity in leadership. So friends, when we say collective responsibility, leadership failure in Africa does not rest only with what politicians do or do not do. There is a politician in all of us on the streets. There is a corrupt minister in all of us on the streets. The businessmen who don't have access to seat of power. The mechanic that cheats clients is a leader in his or her right within that sphere of engagement. So the test for sustainable leadership, collective leadership, is not what happens in churches. It's what happens on the street, as Jeremiah find out. So I suggest that misleadership is to know the right thing to do, but fail to do it for personal gain, for profit, for pride, and various other reasons. Misleadership is the pursuit of benefits and privileges of positions of leadership at the expense of the substance of the stewardship required for such opportunities of high responsibility. And I sum it up by calling it sinful leadership. Sinful leadership, which is no leadership at all, is the influence of failed leaders to reproduce their types by misleading others to replicate all kinds of atrocities. That's why, friends, when we see leadership failure at the top, we should expect to see its reproduction in the marketplace, in schools, in hospitals. And friends, the news is before us, because I went to donate blood once in a hospital, and in the room where to donate blood, there's a television screen which we could not see. We couldn't see well. The TV was on, but we couldn't see it well. Why? Because there is burglary proof. They had to secure the television with burglary proof in a hospital where blood is being donated to rescue people who may be dying. And I asked why. And I'm told if they don't put burglary proof, somebody will come and steal the television. Even in the mortuary, televisions have to be to be protected with burglary proof. And I've suffered embarrassment. Once I went to the town in which I grew up, Jos, in Nigeria. And at the airport, I wanted to use the convenience. And there was this woman outside giving pieces of toilet rolls. She will roll a bit and give you to go into the convenience. And I said, woman, why on earth do you have to do that? There is provision for where tissue paper should be in the bathroom. And she said, with due respect, sir, I'm sorry. I am under authority. Because our leaders have discovered that when they put the toilet paper in the bathroom, some people come in there to steal the toilet paper. Boy, I was shocked. Even toilet paper in public toilets is stolen. But we must go deeper. Why will somebody steal toilet paper from a public toilet? Why do we need to protect television screens with burglary proof? Friends, collapse of moral substance in leadership. So what we see at the top as corruption is replicated to the grassroots. As it is said, that proverb, a fish rots from the head down. It begins at the head, yes. Leadership is the cause. All other things are effects. This now brings us to reflect on how we can overcome this situation. In responding to the question of why we have people in positions of significant responsibility who fail to measure up, I suggest there cannot be such leadership without inner formation. Formation is a word for formation of what it takes to lead God's people or nations. So sound and sustainable leadership must go beyond written codes and regulations. Our nations are not lacking in laws and regulations and so on, but must go beyond that to the laws of God written on the hearts of all. And this is what I call inner formation, inner formation. Because before Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations, Matthew 28:19. Before Matthew 28:19, there was Matthew 4:19. Follow me, I will make you. Sometimes we jump too quickly to, I will make you fishers of men. How can we be fishers of men when we've not been made? So I tell, especially evangelicals who emphasize proclamation, teaching, preaching, that there is a gap between proclamation and demonstration, which affects leadership in high and low places. Proclamation, yes, but the demonstration is lacking because the formation is flawed. The making process of disciples, friends, is not just for evangelism, but for leadership in all spheres of engagement, for Christ to be formed in people. As Paul said, my little children, for whom I labor in birth again until Christ is formed in you. So formation is critical. Let me come towards an end by suggesting some challenges we have on the continent for our reflection and for our engagement. And then we can have some conversation and interaction. Because it would be an oversight to gloss over some pressing challenges impacting leadership in church and in the public sphere, which tend to undermine what sustainable leadership should be as our collective responsibility in various contexts. And I focus on Africa here. I'm troubled by this. The first is what I call our non-confronting cultural sensibilities. In many of our traditional contexts, even in mine when I was growing up, younger people are forbidden to tell older people that they are wrong, even when it is obviously so. When daddy is lying, who are you as a young girl or young boy to say daddy is lying? It is forbidden. Children can hardly say to their parents they are wrong, even when it is clear to all that they are. And it's a mindset carried over to leaders in public office because they are held in such high respect or fear or even fear that they can hardly be corrected. We therefore often defer to those in power almost with such adoration that even when it is obvious they are in the wrong, they cannot be told as it is. They cannot be told they are wrong because it is considered confrontation. So this cultural thing with us, because we are such respectful people, it's considered impolite to confront or correct leaders. And friends, I dare say, including bishops. So such respect militate against our collective sense of right and wrong, and more often than not, we unwittingly pay allegiance and submission to such leaders at the expense even of our loyalty to the King of Kings. So the question is, are there still prophets who can stand before kings and rulers, as well as other leaders, as Nathan did before King David, to say, you are the one, you are wrong, you are the guilty one? This is a challenge that remains with us. Secondly, it's our abdication of leadership to the rich and affluent. Leadership in various African contexts appears to have been abdicated to the rich and affluent, those who have access to and control resources, regardless of the means by which they have obtained such wealth. Hence, increasingly, in many of our contexts, those who pay the piper dictate the tune. You see, especially when elections are coming, politicians go to take massive loans to run their campaigns with the hope that after election, they can pay back. Now, how will they pay back? Of course, from the common purse meant for construction of schools and other things. Money is stolen to pay back the debt. But the more affluent people are, the more we tend to defer to them. So during elections, wealthy individuals sponsor their candidates or cronies for political office with the intention of receiving kickbacks in return once such have been elected. And then thirdly, I must touch on our ethnic or tribal groups, issues of racial identity. You know, there's no indication that God is a tribal God, assigning leadership roles to particular ethnic groups, except perhaps for the Levites, who are largely appointed as custodians of the priesthood. So when God calls people into leadership, it does not imply his anointing or giftings being limited to any particular race or ethnic group. On our continent, sadly, friends, ethnic identity seems to come before the blood of Jesus that has saved us all. The way we view those in other ethnic groups influence our collective responsibility for sustainable leadership. And fourthly, not least, friends, is that the church needs to lead more by example. The church should demonstrate what leadership should be as an example to all other spheres or aspects of life, including homes, institutions, governance, business, etc. Oftentimes, some adopt a mentality of, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So, even related to elections, maybe I'm talking a bit about election because the campaign is strong in Ghana already, even though the election is still sometime in December. So, is in the weeks leading to election, many churches carry out the most significant fundraising events or harambes, with politicians being invited as chairpersons and chief launchers. And you know, the unspoken rule is, do you really need our vote? If you do, demonstrate it by how much you give to our church project. Such practices undermine the role of the church as a prophetic voice speaking truth to power. The ultimate question is regarding leadership, as it should be in all contexts, at home, within the church, institutions, and nation. Is our Christianity deep enough to challenge and go counterculture? In every sphere, Christian leadership is needed. These are my reflections as I think of our collective responsibility, that we should not limit it to politicians, that we should not limit it to positions, that we should not limit it to NGOs, but that every Christian saved by grace who knows the right thing to do must do so, bringing the Lordship of Jesus Christ to bear on all spheres of engagement, in the marketplace, in the hospital, in the schools, in politics, in the economy, and everywhere that we've been placed as salt and light.